Please. Laura's voice cracked through the frozen darkness, her arms trembling around the infant. Please don't send us back out there. Nathan Kim stood in the barn doorway, lantern raised, staring at the old woman curled in his hayloft. Snow dusted her grey hair like death's fingerprints. The baby, Ophelia, barely whimpered, her lips tinged blue. It was Christmas night, 1885, in a forgotten corner of California, where winter showed no mercy. Rewind 12 hours. Nathan had been checking his property alone, as he'd done every night for 3 years since losing his wife to fever. The barn door stood ajar. He'd secured it at sunset. His hand moved to the rifle slung across his back as he stepped inside. The temperature had dropped to brutal lows. His breath ghosted white in the lantern glow. Above, in the loft, he heard it. A sound that didn't belong. Weak, desperate, human. He climbed the ladder with his heart pounding against his ribs. What he found stopped him cold. Laura Patel, 60 years old, lay curled around a 6-month-old baby. Both wore clothes too thin for California's unforgiving winter. The woman's face was pale as ash, her breathing shallow. The child stirred weakly, frost glittering on the threadbare blanket wrapped around her tiny body. They were dying, right there in his barn. Jesus Christ, Nathan whispered, setting the lantern down with shaking hands. Laura's eyes fluttered open, dark, terrified, pleading. Please, she rasped, don't make us leave. Nathan's mind raced. Who were they? How long had they been here? But those questions could wait. Right now, 2 lives hung in the balance. And if you've ever wondered what you'd do in that moment, when mercy and fear collide, then stay with this story. Drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about family. Nathan didn't hesitate. He shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it around both of them. Laura's body felt like ice beneath his hands. Too cold, too still. Ophelia whimpered, a sound so fragile it barely existed. Can you walk? Nathan asked, his voice urgent but gentle. Laura shook her head weakly. I tried. Couldn't. No time for explanations. Nathan scooped them both into his arms, cradling the baby against his chest while supporting Laura's frail frame. She weighed almost nothing, as if the cold had already begun claiming her. He descended the ladder with aching precision, each step measured and careful. The winter night bit through his shirt, but he barely felt it. All that mattered was getting them inside. Across the yard, through the cabin door. The fire had burned down to embers, casting dancing shadows across the small room. Nathan laid them on the rug near the hearth, his hands already reaching for kindling. The fire caught, grew, threw heat and light across their pale faces. Laura's lips had turned a terrifying shade of blue. Ophelia's skin looked translucent, too white, as if life itself was seeping away. Nathan worked with desperate efficiency. He stripped away their damp outer layers with respectful care, Laura's worn shawl, Ophelia's soaked blanket. Their clothes told stories of poverty and desperation. No winter coats, shoes with holes, nothing adequate for survival. He brought warm water, not hot, that would be dangerous, and carefully applied it to their hands and feet. Blankets from his own bed. Ophelia he wrapped in wool and flannel, holding her close to share his body heat. She was so small. Her tiny fingers were mottled, circulation returning slowly. Her breathing was shallow but steady. Laura stirred as dawn approached, her eyes opening wide with terror. Ophelia! She's here, Nathan said quietly, showing her the baby in his arms. She's warming up. Laura's eyes filled with tears, but the relief was temporary. because outside, the storm was just beginning. "Who are you?" Nathan asked once Laura could sit upright, a cup of warm broth in her shaking hands. "Laura Patel," she managed, her voice raw. "This is Ophelia, my granddaughter." Nathan watched the old woman drink, color slowly returning to her weathered face. She looked older than 60, worn down by hardship and loss. Ophelia slept against his chest, her breathing finally steady and strong. "Where were you going?" Laura's eyes dropped. "Anywhere. Nowhere. Just away." The story came out in fragments. Laura's daughter had died in childbirth 6 months ago. The father, Laura's son-in-law, had abandoned them immediately, leaving Laura alone with an infant and no means of support. She'd worked where she could, taking any job that allowed her to keep Ophelia close. But work dried up. Money ran out. The boarding house owner had given them until Christmas Eve to pay or leave. They'd left. "I thought we could walk to the next town," Laura said, shame coloring her voice. "Find help. But the storm came so fast. We got turned around in the snow. When I saw your barn, I thought, just for one night, just to get warm, I planned to leave before dawn." "You would have died," Nathan said flatly. "I know." Laura's hands trembled around the cup. "But what choice did I have? I couldn't let Ophelia freeze. I couldn't—" Her voice broke. Nathan understood desperation. He'd felt it himself 3 years ago when his wife lay dying and doctors turned them away for lack of payment. He'd held her hand as fever consumed her, helpless and broken. "You can stay," he said, "until you're strong enough to travel." Laura's head snapped up. "I have no money to pay you." "I'm not asking for money." "Then why?" Nathan looked down at Ophelia, at her peaceful, sleeping face. "Because it's Christmas. Because you need help. Because he'd been alone too long. And this empty cabin had started feeling like a tomb." But he didn't say that part. What he didn't know was that Laura was hiding something that would soon force them both to make an impossible choice. Days passed. Laura's strength returned gradually, color rising in her cheeks. Ophelia thrived, growing plumper and more alert. The cabin adjusted around them, making space. Nathan woke before dawn as always, tended his livestock, checked fences. When he returned, Laura was usually working despite his protests. She couldn't sit idle, she said. It wasn't in her nature. She washed dishes, swept floors, mended his worn clothes with careful stitches, small contributions that meant everything to her dignity. "You don't have to," Nathan said one morning, finding her kneading bread dough at his table. "I want to." Laura's weathered hands moved with practiced skill. "You've given us so much. Let me give something back. You're recovering. You need rest." "I've rested for a week." She shaped the dough, set it near the stove to rise. "When's the last time you had fresh bread?" Nathan couldn't remember. He'd been surviving on hardtack and whatever was easiest. "Fair point," he admitted. Laura smiled, a real smile, unguarded. Something in Nathan's chest shifted at the sight. Ophelia sat on a blanket by the fire, playing with a wooden rattle Nathan had carved from scrap pine. He'd worked on it by lamplight, hands remembering skills he thought forgotten. When he'd given it to Laura, she'd held it like it was gold. "She loves it," Laura said now, watching Ophelia shake the rattle with delight. "She sleeps with it every night. It's just wood. It's kindness. That's worth more than wood." Evenings they talked. Laura spoke of her life before. Growing up poor, marrying young, losing her husband to mine collapse, raising her daughter alone, watching her fall in love and marry too quickly. The joy of Ophelia's birth, the devastation of her daughter's death. Nathan listened more than he spoke, but sometimes, Late at night, with the fire burning low, he shared fragments of his own story. His wife, their plans for this cabin, how she'd made everything feel like home, how empty it had been since she died. He didn't mention the closed room at the back of the cabin, the nursery they'd prepared, the cradle that sat waiting for a child who never came. Laura saw it anyway. She was too observant not to notice the sealed door, the distant sadness in his eyes. But she didn't ask. Some doors opened in their own time. What neither of them realized was that time was running out faster than they knew. One evening, Ophelia grew fussy. Laura had been up the previous night when the baby was teething, and exhaustion showed in her lined face. Nathan took Ophelia without thinking, walked her around the cabin, humming low and tuneless. The baby settled against his shoulder, her small body warm and trusting. Within minutes, she was asleep. When Nathan looked up, Laura was watching with tears streaming down her face. "What's wrong?" he asked quietly, not wanting to wake Ophelia. "Nothing's wrong." Laura wiped her eyes. "She trusts you. Ophelia doesn't trust easily. After everything, after losing her mother, after so many cold nights in strange places, she stopped letting anyone but me hold her. But you—" She shook her head. "She knows you're good." Nathan looked down at the sleeping infant, at her tiny hand curled against his shirt. Something fierce and protective surged through him, a feeling he'd thought died with his wife. "She's easy to love," he managed. Laura's eyes met his across the firelit cabin. Something passed between them, unspoken but powerful. Recognition, understanding. The dangerous beginning of something neither had planned. And if you're feeling what Nathan felt in that moment, that pull toward something real and terrifying, then you understand why stories like this matter. They remind us that family isn't always blood, that love can grow in the coldest winter. Hit that subscribe button if you believe in second chances, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, because Laura's about to reveal a secret that changes everything. Laura looked away first, flushed. "I should tell you something," she said softly, "about why we were really running." Nathan carefully laid Ophelia in her makeshift cradle, a dresser drawer lined with blankets, and tucked her in. "What is it?" Laura's hands twisted together. "Ophelia's father, my son-in-law, he didn't just abandon us. He wants her back. Not because he loves her, because she's useful. There's inheritance money from my daughter's side. If he has Ophelia, he controls it." Nathan's blood ran cold. "He's looking for you?" "I don't know. Maybe. I left no trail. But if he finds us—" Laura's voice cracked. "He's not a good man, Nathan. He'll take her, and I'll never see her again." Outside, wind howled like wolves. Inside, the fire crackled. And Nathan Thornton realized that saving them once wasn't enough. He'd have to be willing to fight to keep them safe. The winter deepened. Snow piled against the cabin walls, sealing them into a small world of firelight and warmth. For 3 weeks, they existed in fragile peace, Nathan, Laura, and Ophelia creating something that felt dangerously like family. But peace never lasted. The letter arrived on a bitter January morning. The postman had struggled through drifts to deliver it, his face red with cold. "For Mrs. Patel," he said, handing Nathan the envelope. "General delivery. Been sitting at the post office for weeks." Nathan brought it inside with a sense of dread. Laura's hands shook as she opened it. Her face went white as she read. "What is it?" Nathan asked. "It's from him, Gregory, Ophelia's father." Laura's voice was barely a whisper. "He knows we're in California. He's offering a reward for information about our whereabouts. $50. $50 was a fortune. enough to tempt anyone. "He'll find us," Laura said, panic rising. "Someone will remember seeing an old woman with a baby. Someone will talk. We have to leave. Today. Now." "Where will you go?" Nathan's voice was steady, but his mind was racing. "I don't know. Somewhere he can't find us. Mexico, maybe. Or you'll freeze to death before you reach the next town." Nathan took the letter, read it himself. The words were cold, legal, threatening. Gregory claimed Laura had kidnapped his daughter, that she was mentally unstable, that the child was in danger. All lies. "He can't have her," Laura said fiercely. "I don't care what lies he tells. Ophelia is mine. My daughter gave her to me with her dying breath, made me promise to keep her safe." Nathan looked at Ophelia, playing quietly with her rattle by the fire. Innocent, unaware that her entire future hung in the balance. He thought about his wife, about the child they'd lost, about 3 years of loneliness in this cabin, about what it meant to have purpose again. "Then we fight," Nathan said quietly. Laura stared at him. "What?" "We fight. Legal. Proper. I know a lawyer in Sacramento. Good man. He owes me a favor." Nathan's jaw set in determination. "We get ahead of this. File for custody before Gregory can act. Prove he abandoned you both. Prove he's unfit. That could take months, and money we don't have. I have money." Nathan had been saving for years, living frugally, building his stake. "And we have something more important. We have the truth." Laura's eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do this? Risk everything for us?" "Because you're already family," Nathan thought. "Because this cabin came alive when you walked into it. Because Ophelia's laughter is the first joy I've felt in 3 years. But what he said was, because it's right." Outside, clouds gathered. A storm was coming. But not just from the sky. They made plans. Nathan would ride to Sacramento, meet with the lawyer, start legal proceedings. Laura would stay hidden at the cabin with Ophelia, away from prying eyes. But the night before Nathan was set to leave, everything changed. A knock came at the door. Both adults froze. It was past midnight. No one traveled in this weather unless... Laura grabbed Ophelia, moved quickly toward the back room. Nathan motioned for silence, reached for his rifle. Another knock, harder this time. "Nathan Kim?" A man's voice, unfamiliar. "I know you're in there. Open up." Nathan cracked the door. 2 men stood on his porch, one tall and thin with a marshal's badge, the other shorter, well-dressed, with cold eyes. "Gregory." "Can I help you?" Nathan kept his voice neutral, blocking the doorway. The marshal spoke. "We're looking for Laura Patel and an infant named Ophelia. We have reason to believe they might be on your property." "What reason?" The well-dressed man, Gregory, stepped forward. "I'm the child's father. That woman kidnapped my daughter. I have legal custody." He produced papers, official-looking documents. Nathan didn't move. "Don't know anyone by those names." "Mind if we search?" the marshal asked. "Yes, I mind." Nathan's grip tightened on the rifle. "This is private property. You need a warrant." Gregory's face twisted with anger. "You're harboring a criminal. That makes you complicit." "I'm harboring no one." Nathan met his eyes steadily. "Now get off my land." For a long moment, nobody moved. The marshal looked uncomfortable. Gregory looked ready to explode. Finally, the marshal spoke. "We'll be back with a warrant. If she's here, you're making things worse for everyone." They left. Nathan watched until their horses disappeared into the snowy darkness. Inside, Laura was trembling. "He found us. How did he—" "Postman probably talked." Nathan's mind was racing. "We don't have much time. Maybe a day before they return with legal authority." "Then we run." "No." Nathan turned to face her. "Running makes you look guilty. We stay. We fight this properly. They have a marshal, Nathan. Legal papers. What do we have? We have the truth." Nathan moved to the closed door at the back of the cabin, the nursery he hadn't opened in 3 years. "And we have something else." He opened the door. Inside was a rocking chair, a cradle, tiny clothes folded on shelves. Evidence of preparation, of planning, of expectation. And on the small desk, carefully preserved, his wife's journal. "My wife documented everything when she was pregnant," Nathan said quietly. "Her thoughts, her fears, her dreams for our child." He picked up the journal, opened it carefully. "Including this." He showed Laura a page dated 3 years ago. His wife's careful handwriting filled the margins. "If anything happens to me, I want Nathan to have children in his life, however they come, biological or adopted or found. He has too much love to waste on loneliness. Promise me, whoever reads this, promise me you'll help him remember that family is what you build, not what you're born into." Laura read it twice, tears spilling down her cheeks. "She knew," Nathan said. "Somehow, she knew." Outside, dawn was breaking. Inside, a decision had been made. They would fight for Ophelia. Together. Whatever it took. The marshal returned 2 days later with a warrant. Nathan let them search, watched as they went through every room. Laura sat by the fire, Ophelia in her arms, both silent and dignified. Gregory stayed outside, pacing like a wolf. The marshal found nothing illegal. No evidence of kidnapping, no signs of mistreatment, just an old woman caring for a baby in a warm, clean cabin. "Mrs. Patel," the marshal said finally, "Mr. Hartley claims you took his daughter without permission. Is that true?" "My daughter gave Ophelia to me," Laura said quietly. "With her dying breath. She made me promise to protect her. Gregory had already told us he wanted nothing to do with a baby. He left us at the hospital. We didn't see him again until after my daughter's funeral, when he suddenly cared about inheritance money." The marshal's expression shifted slightly. "Do you have proof?" "Hospital records. Death certificate naming me as next of kin. Witnesses who saw him abandon us." Laura's voice was steady. "And this?" She produced a letter, worn, tear-stained, but readable. Her daughter's handwriting, written days before death. "Mother, if anything happens to me, Ophelia is yours. Gregory doesn't want her. He's made that clear. He wants my father's money that comes to her when she turns 18. Don't let him have her, please. Keep her safe. Keep her loved. You're the only family she needs." The marshal read it twice, looked at Gregory through the window, back at Laura. "This complicates things," he said finally. "My late wife's journal supports Mrs. Patel's custody," Nathan added, producing it. "Documents her character, her fitness as a guardian, and my willingness to provide for both of them." The marshal was quiet for a long moment. "Mr. Kim, are you saying you're taking responsibility for this woman and child?" "I'm saying I'm making them family," Nathan said clearly. "Legal, permanent family." Gregory burst through the door then, face red with rage. "This is ridiculous. She's my daughter. I have rights." "Rights you abandoned," the marshal said coldly. along with your wife and child, when they needed you most. I want my daughter, now." The marshal looked at Ophelia, alert, healthy, clearly loved and cared for. Then at Gregory, angry, entitled, motivated by money rather than love. "Here's what's going to happen," the marshal said. "This goes before a judge. Let the court decide custody. In the meantime, the child stays where she is. She's safe, she's cared for, and there's no evidence of wrongdoing." That's my decision," the marshal interrupted. "Unless you want to explain to a judge why you abandoned your wife and infant daughter, then suddenly want custody when money's involved." Gregory's face went purple with rage, but he had no argument. They left. Laura collapsed into a chair, shaking with relief. "He'll try again. Let him." Nathan's voice was firm. "We have truth on our side, and we have each other." Ophelia babbled happily, unaware of the battle being fought for her future. But the real test was still to come. The custody hearing was scheduled for late February. Nathan, Laura, and Ophelia traveled to Sacramento with the lawyer, a stern man named Henderson who'd known Nathan for years. The courtroom was cold, formal, intimidating. Gregory sat with his own lawyer, dressed expensively, playing the role of grieving father. Laura wore her best dress, still worn, still mended, but clean and dignified. Ophelia sat quiet in her arms, wide-eyed. Nathan sat beside them, steady as stone. The judge was an older man with sharp eyes. He listened as Gregory's lawyer painted Laura as unstable, dangerous, a woman who'd stolen a child out of spite. Then Henderson spoke. He presented Laura's daughter's letter. Hospital records showing Gregory's abandonment, testimony from nurses who'd witnessed his rejection of his newborn daughter. Financial records showing he'd refused to pay medical bills, forcing Laura to exhaust her savings. And Nathan's wife's journal. Proof that this cabin, this family, was built on love rather than blood. "Your Honor," Henderson said quietly, "this isn't about legal technicalities. It's about what's best for Ophelia. She has thrived under Mrs. Patel's care. She is loved, safe, healthy. Mr. Hartley abandoned her at birth and only returned when money became involved. The choice should be clear." The judge studied the documents, looked at Gregory, expensive suit, calculating expression, then at Laura, worn but dignified, holding Ophelia with obvious love. "Mr. Hartley," the judge said, "can you tell me your daughter's favorite toy?" Gregory blinked. She's an infant. She doesn't have favorites yet." "Wrong," the judge said flatly. "According to testimony, she has a wooden rattle she carries everywhere, carved by Mr. Kim, sleeps with it every night. A father should know these things." Gregory had no answer. The judge turned to Laura. "Mrs. Patel, what does Ophelia do when she's happy?" "She kicks her feet and babbles," Laura said immediately. "Makes a sound like da-da-da when she's excited. Reaches for faces she trusts, smiles with her whole body." The judge nodded slowly. "Custody is granted to Laura Patel, with Mr. Nathan Kim serving as legal guardian and provider. Mr. Hartley, you have 30 days to appeal. If you choose to do so, I warn you, the evidence against your character is substantial. You abandoned your wife and child. Only greed brought you back. This court will not reward that behavior." Gregory stood, furious, but beaten. They'd won. Outside the courtroom, Laura cried with relief. Nathan held them both, his family, legal and recognized. "Thank you," Laura whispered. "Thank you for fighting for us." We fought together, Nathan said. That's what family does. But the story wasn't over yet. Spring came to California like redemption. Snow melted, revealing green grass and wildflowers. Birds returned, filling the morning air with song. In the small cabin that had once held only loneliness, life bloomed. Nathan and Laura were married quietly by a circuit preacher in March. No fancy ceremony, just vows spoken before God and witnesses, with Ophelia babbling happily throughout. The preacher also handled adoption papers. Ophelia Patel became Ophelia Kim, legally, permanently, completely theirs. That evening they sat on the porch watching sunset paint the sky gold and pink. Ophelia played at their feet, pulling herself up on furniture, learning to stand. She'll be walking soon, Laura said softly. She will. Nathan watched his daughter with pride. His daughter. Not by blood, but by choice, by love, by the courage to open his heart again. Laura leaned against him, comfortable and content. Do you ever regret it? Taking us in that Christmas night? Nathan thought about his life before. Empty, hollow, just going through motions. Then he looked at what he had now. A wife, a daughter, purpose, joy, family. Regret? He shook his head. Taking you in was the first right thing I'd done in 3 years. Maybe the first right thing I ever did. You saved our lives. You saved mine. Nathan kissed the top of her head. I was just existing before you came, not living. You and Ophelia reminded me what life's supposed to feel like. Inside the cabin, the nursery door stood open, no longer a shrine to grief, but a room filled with laughter and love. The cradle Nathan had built years ago finally held the child it was meant for. Not the child he'd expected, but the one he was always meant to have. Ophelia took a wobbly step, squealed with delight, fell on her padded bottom. Both adults laughed. There will be hard times ahead, Laura said. Life doesn't stop being difficult. No, Nathan agreed, but we'll face them together. That's what makes the difference. They sat in comfortable silence as stars began appearing overhead. Inside, lamplight glowed warm through windows. The cabin that had been dark for so long now blazed with life. And if you've stayed with us through this entire journey, from that frozen Christmas night to this moment of hope, then you understand why stories like this matter. They remind us that families are built through courage and love, that second chances exist if we're brave enough to reach for them. Subscribe if this story touched your heart. Share it with someone who needs to believe in new beginnings. And comment below. Tell us where you're watching from and whether you believe in the power of found family. Because somewhere, right now, someone is waiting in a cold barn. And someone else is deciding whether to open the door. What we choose in those moments defines everything. Thank you for being here, for witnessing this story. For believing, like Nathan and Laura, that love is always worth the risk. Nathan looked at his family, his wife, his daughter, his purpose, and smiled. The long winter was finally, truly over. Spring had come at last, and with it, hope bloomed eternal.